بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد. Dear brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight, alhamdulillah, is the fourth night of the holy month of Ramadan, and I wish you all a Ramadan Mubarak. The topic of today's review is highly pertinent to the current chaotic situation in the Muslim world. In the year 2011, we witnessed two global phenomena in the Islamic world: the Arab Spring and the winding down of the Iraq War, both of which gave rise to much optimism in the region. The results, as seen today, have been far from the optimistic expectation. We are seeing the self-destruction of many Muslim nations. Libya, thought to have become a beacon of hope in the region, is now a hub for al-Qaeda and cohorts. Syria, the once cultural jewel of the Middle East, has been utterly destroyed, and its neighbor to the east, Iraq, has become infected by the same destructive forces. The Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, Daesh, ISIS, excommunicated by the al-Qaeda Amir Ayman al-Zawahiri for being too radical, have captured large swaths of land in Iraq and Syria and have established a new state, the Islamic State, surprising all. In the process of doing so, brutality not seen since medieval times has resulted in the slaughter of thousands of innocent people, specifically religious minorities and those who differ in terms of sect. This bloodshed has alarmed the entire world and has led for the call of action by Western powers, US and NATO. These extraordinary circumstances call for the re-examination of history, of yore and recent, to understand how ISIS attained power with such expediency, and the main point of interest is where it differs from the other contemporary jihadi extremist groups. Unlike al-Qaeda and so forth, this group, ISIS, has successfully re-established the caliphate, or supposedly caliphate. So tonight, we will look at the work of the late scholar Majid al-Khuduri and his book titled The Islamic Law of Nations, in association with the declaration of jihad and the role of the caliphate. With the usage of this work, I'll show how ISIS got such popularity in the ranks of extremists and why groups like al-Qaeda are on the demise, whereas ISIS will unfortunately only increase in stature. By doing such, I'll be in a way reviewing the book and highlighting its importance. So this book, The Islamic Law of Nations, is a translation with commentary of Muhammad al-Shaybani Siyar. Muhammad al-Shaybani was an 8th century scholar who was largely associated with Abu Hanifa as his leading disciple. Thus, we find this text largely comprised of the legal opinions of Abu Hanifa. Interestingly, the Zaydi Shi'i claimed that much of the rulings come from the great martyr Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Hassan ibn al-Hassan ibn Ali, known popularly amongst the Shia as an-Nafs al-Zakiyah, the pure soul. If factual, this book would have quite the significance for the Shia Muslims as well. And it is true that Abu Hanifa and the students had an affinity with the Alid movements of the time, led by the likes of Zayd bin Ali and an-Nafs al-Zakiyah, even though there were many grievous acts of Abu Hanifa in relation to the Ahl Bayt alayhim as-salam. Moving on, this book was the first notable work of its kind, for it is a legal text on the law of nations, on war, on territory, taxation, punishments, etc. Muhammad al-Shaybani's work is accepted by the Sunni jurists especially as an authority on the issue of jihad, and thus a few anecdotes have been taken out to show the complexities of Islamic jihad and how, without having a ruler, it is practically impossible to perform. So, the primary concern of groups like ISIS is to wage war, jihad be safe. Majid Quduri writes on page 16, in Islamic legal theory, the jihad was permanent obligation upon the believers to be carried out by a continuous process of warfare, psychological and political, even if not strictly military. No other form of fighting was lawful, whether within Islamic territory or outside it. The Imam was empowered to decide when the jihad was to commence or stop. No essential difference among leading jurists is to be found on this fundamental duty, whether in orthodox or heterodox doctrine. So Majid Quduri explains that jihad is a religious obligation for all Muslims, be they orthodox or heterodox, is of little to no concern. But what is concerning to all interested in the subject is that without an imam, a jihad can neither be commanded, commenced, or halted. An imam in this circumstance denotes to not just an Islamic leader, but the Islamic leader, as in the Khalifa or the Hakim. So extremist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS both want to wage war, but without a caliph, such a war is not permissible. That is why ISIS was in such a rush to declare the bloke Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi as the Khalifa. Moving on, why is the presence of a Khalifa a necessity? We can see from the following questions posed to Abu Hanifa on the complexities of war. One such complexity is on the issue of captives. In all wars, captives are taken, so what is the Islamic ruling on such? On page 100 we find Abu Hanifa is being asked, if male captives of war were taken from the territory of war, do you think that the Imam should kill them all or divide them as slaves among the Muslims? Abu Hanifa replied, the Imam is entitled to a choice between talking to them, the Imam is entitled to a choice between taking them to the territory of Islam to be divided among the warriors and killing them while in the territory of war. So the Imam is given the prerogative as to whether the captives are to be killed or enslaved. This is only his right. Thus, without being able to handle captives, how can any group of people just declare jihad? It's just not possible. Another complexity would be who is given the right on the issue of religious penalties. Many, if not all, jihadi groups have numerous videos of them stoning and whipping people. This, in fact, is not legitimate unless the groups have established an Islamic State, as ISIS supposedly has. Muhammad al-Shaybani writes on this issue on page 103. So Abu Hanifa is being asked, if a Muslim army entered the territory of war led by a commander, do you think he would be competent to enforce the religious penalties, hudud, in his army camp? He replied, no. I asked, if the governor of a city or a province, such as Asham or Iraq, entered the territory of war at the head of an army, would he be competent to impose religious penalties or retaliation in his army camp? He replied, yes. I asked, would he be competent to order the cutting off of the hand for theft and enforce the penalty for false accusation? He replied, yes. I asked, and also to enforce the penalties for zina and the drinking of wine? He replied, yes. I asked if there was at the head of the army a commander, not the governor of Asham or Iraq, and the army was 4,000 or 5,000 strong, would he be competent to enforce any of the religious penalties stated above? He replied, no. Therefore, a commander like Osama bin Laden, as an example, however large his army of even 4,000, 5,000 soldiers, does not possess the right to impose the religious penalties. Only a person ruling over large swaths of land, such as a governor, can enforce the religious penalties. But a governor is not the same as a Khalifa. So why then is he also given this authority? Because the governor preserves the station of the caliph above him. for he is a subnational executive, ruling over territory on behalf of his superior, wherein the superior is not able to do so himself. Therefore, it seems that ISIS very much based off their actions in the quest for establishing the Islamic State is based off their actions are from the Islamic texts, whereas the other groups remain dubious in legitimacy. So why does a small difference command such popularity for ISIS, whereas many, if not most, of their ambitions are the same as Al Qaeda? The reason for such is unfortunately the Sunni Muslims' fantastical view on what caliphate is. It derives from a deep-rooted nostalgia of the past that the Muslims, supposedly under the rule of the caliphate of the Ottomans and predecessors, were able to stand on their own feet in comparison today, when many, if not all, Muslim lands are subjugated by non-Muslim entities. This view is highly dangerous and must be contained, otherwise groups like ISIS will continue to emerge. Nonetheless, texts like Siyar are extremely important for all those interested in foreign policy, international affairs, international law, conflict studies, or just in law in general. So I highly recommend this text. And with that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's reviews. I tried to do it in a little different style. And please remember me in your du'as till tomorrow night. Assalamu alaikum.